recognized symbol of excellence for your entertainment.
Iron Maiden? Excellent!
Welcome to Machino Music, the show that puts the music in Machino music, with your host, me, Brett Strong. Today on Machino Music, I'm going to be talking about Iron Maiden. Okay, here we go. Iron Maiden, huge band, one of the biggest heavy metal bands, pretty well started the new wave of British heavy metal, along with Judas Priest. Now, I must say off the top, to me, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden is kind of like the Beatles, Rolling Stones debate. Who do you like more, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones? I find it's the same with Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. Now, for me, as far as the Beatles, Rolling Stones, I love both bands, but there's sometimes maybe where I like the Beatles a little bit more. There's times where I like the Rolling Stones a little bit more. Where I think, for me, the Judas Priest, Iron Maiden is, I'm a bit more Judas Priest. I lean more to the side of Judas Priest. I like all their eras. All of their albums are great. Well, maybe not Nostradamus, that album is poo. But, pretty much like all eras of Judas Priest. Iron Maiden, I'm very selective in some of their eras, which I'll get into here. Mainly, it's the Bruce Dickinson era. No disrespect to Paul Di'Anno. They had some great stuff with Paul Di'Anno, their original lead singer. The first two albums are great. The self-titled and Killers are fantastic albums. But really, that Dickinson era is when they really kind of just blew up, and that's when they became Iron Maiden. So, I'm kind of in that era, and I'll be talking about those albums a little bit. Also, another thing I'll say is about the Judas Priest, Iron Maiden kind of debate is Judas Priest songs kind of connected to me a little bit more. Whereas with Iron Maiden, I'm not a fan of too much of the swords and sorcery, let's call it. The swords and sorcery heavy metal. Where it's about like battles and dragons and swords and sorcery and, like that kind of thing. Iron Maiden did it better than most bands. I think they didn't go as ridiculous as a lot of bands. They're not Manowar. Again, Manowar, I know there's a lot of Manowar fans. Never did a whole ton for me. I like a few Manowar songs, but just could never get past the whole just over-the-top, ridiculous warrior thing, which Iron Maiden thankfully didn't get too far into, or even in their lyrical content. The only way I was able to stand doing that is Ronnie James Dio, but that's a discussion for another day because Ronnie James Dio is fantastic. So I'm gonna put Ronnie James Dio in my back pocket, and I could because he's really, really small. So, and maybe and save a show on Ronnie, the late great legendary Ronnie James Dio, for another day. But we're talking about Iron Maiden here. That was a big long rant, and that was a big spit I just did right there. But we're going to keep going here with talk on Iron Maiden. So let's get in some albums here. This is a bootleg copy. I just happened to find this. Number of the Beast, the classic album. I completely forgot I had this bootleg copy here. Oh, man, it's like even busted. Yeah, I don't know why I never replaced this. I probably have a real copy somewhere, just as the only one I could find. But yeah, this is a great album. The title track, Number of the Beast, is classic. Run to the Hills. I'm kind of tired of Run to the Hills. I'm never a huge fan of that song. But, it's good for what it is. The Prisoner. 22 Arcadia Avenue. Hallowed Be Thy Name. Yeah. Just, it's a really good album. This is the kind of this got everyone kind of Really into Iron Maiden. This was the big breakthrough. And for me, like, I like the first two albums. Like, again, I talked about Paul Di'Anno. Clive Burr, I thought was a great drummer. But Nicko McBrain, I thought everything came together. You got Bruce Dickinson and then Nicko McBrain. Nicko McBrain is just an awesome drummer. I mean, that guy is heavy metal. So that's why I kind of prefer this era of Iron Maiden, where it just seemed to all click and all come together. Got No Prayer for the Dying. This is considered, like, everybody hates this album. This is kind of one of their worst ones, but this got some good tunes on it. I really like it. Tail Gunner's a great opening track. Holy Smoke is good. I like the title track. Public Enema #1 is a ridiculous title. Sounds like a Frank Zappa song, but no, it's Iron Maiden doing it. But yeah, that's a not bad tune. I mean, the title just... I like the Assassin. Hooks in You is actually kind of one of those songs that people... It's kind of like a hair metal tune. It sounds like it could be done by, like, Joe Blow hair metal band, and you wouldn't know it's Iron Maiden. I mean, it's really poppy and doesn't really sound like them, but I dig the tune for what it is. But yeah, it's a departure. Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. Mother Russia. Yeah, this is a pretty good album. I mean, gets a lot of crap. It was $7 in European pounds. In Euro. $7, probably in a bargain bin, which is where people think this album should be, if not the toilet. But you know, I don't mind that one. Next one, Fear of the Dark. So another big album, another one that kind of gets a little bit of crap from people, but no, I still really like it. I mean, Be Quick or Be Dead, the opening track, like it. The Fugitive, that's a really underrated tune. I really like The Fugitive. I've never heard people talk about the Iron Maiden tune, The Fugitive. Really dig it. The title track is, you know, kind of one of those ones you either love or you hate. I've heard a bit of both. I like the title track for what it is. It's a pretty good album. It's kind of the last, people say this is the last of the classic era of the band. Like of what the... Like that, you know, Dickinson comes in, Nicko McBrain comes in, and things start to click, and then they just started kind of trying to go in a bit different direction with subsequent albums. And a lot of people kind of consider this the end of an era. But this is still a good one. Got some good tunes on it. All right, these next two albums I think are just, you know, like the tippy top of Iron Maiden for me. They're my two favorite Iron Maiden albums. They could kind of interchange, although I think one wins out. Peace of Mind. I mean, this, I think even more, like for the Dickinson era, even more than Number of the Beast, this one just defines the band. Where Eagles Dare, Flight of Icarus, The Trooper, I mean, that song is like, that's like the Iron Maiden theme song almost. That's what it feels like. That's just a great tune. Still Life, Quest for Fire. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people kind of dump on Quest for Fire. I actually dig that tune. I mean, Grandiose. You got a lot of that grandiose when Bruce Dickinson coming into the band. Very theatrical, where Paul Di'Anno was a bit more of a kind of a punk rock kind of guy. But you know, still do like Quest for Fire, as theatrical and sort of grandiose as it is. Yeah, but this is just a fantastic album. I mean, this is often tops when people do Iron Maiden album rankings. This one tops the list, and it is great. I mean, their album covers run like anyone else too. I mean, Eddie, They were like the first band to have a mascot. I mean, the whole idea of any band, not just heavy metal bands, but any bands having like a distinctive mascot, all goes back to Iron Maiden. They were really one of the first bands to do that. But this one, I think, is the absolute best. This is my favorite Iron Maiden album. I mean, I'm thinking again, it's any better than POWERSLAVE. I mean, yeah, it's kind of an obvious one. I mean, those songs, I mean, some people are, you know, Aces High, 2 Minutes to Midnight. Some people say they're not big fans of that tune. I still love it. I think the first Iron Maiden I ever saw was the video for 2 Minutes to Midnight. I was like, hey, this is really cool. I like this. Yeah, this is... So, yeah, I have a connection to 2 Minutes to Midnight. Lost for Words, Big Aura. An instrumental. Flash of the Blade is a sort of swords and sorcery kind of tune, which I don't really like, talking about your blade, your steel. Peace of Mind has sun and steel. So they had some of those swords and sorcery type tunes that I'm not a big fan of, but they did it actually okay. I don't mind it, and I like Flash of the Blade. It is a great tune. The Duelists, Back in the Village. The title track is fantastic. I love POWERSLAVE. Probably my favorite Iron Maiden tune is the title track. And of course, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. I mean, this is just, like, I think a perfect album. From beginning to end, this is a perfect album. So that's why I really could say this is my favorite Iron Maiden album. And it's just, it's so good. I mean, and like the whole rest of the band, I mean, like Steve Harris is a phenomenal bass player. Like they just have, like the musicianship on Iron Maiden sometimes just goes a little bit higher than some of the other heavy metal bands of the time, even more so than Judas Priest. But yeah, musicianship on Iron Maiden albums, I think, just goes a little bit higher. But sometimes the songwriting for me, like, you know, maybe a bit controversial to be saying this, but yeah, sometimes for me the songwriting just doesn't quite, you know, do it for me. But no denying the impact of this band, and I am a fan. I wouldn't have these albums if I wasn't. So I thought I would do a little talk about Iron Maiden, some of my favorite Iron Maiden albums. Ones that I couldn't find, that I'm sure I had somewhere, are... I got an itch. I'm going to sneeze, and it's going to be really big. It's going to be like a grenade going off. So just be ready for that, if I do. But... two albums I just want to mention. I'm sure I had them. I couldn't... I looked all over. I mean, I blew my stack looking for them. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, which kind of feels like a progressive rock album. It's got a very progressive kind of like, that was actually some people kind of fell out with the band with Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, but I dig this album. And also Somewhere in Time is another one that say is part of this classic era. But whatever your era is of Iron Maiden, wherever you came into the band, I mean, doesn't matter, we all hear these things differently. And I mean, really for me, these are kind of the albums that I go to, especially Peace of Mind and POWERSLAVE. I mean, I think those albums are just definitive of the band. So that's just a little discussion on Iron Maiden. And if you're a fan, I hope you enjoyed this. That's it for this week. Until we meet again, this is Brett Strong saying good journey.